Awesome. So I'm going to try and run through this in 10 minutes. And I will start off by introducing myself. Hi, I'm Henri. I work on a product called Privy. I am very lucky to have these kind folks as investors, which is why they allow me to come here and talk to all of you. And I'm going to try and convince you to think about the consequences of what data sovereignty means in Web3 up and down the stack. And I actually think the last two talks were really good in showing us sort of some of the philosophical aspects and the moral aspects of why we should care about data sovereignty, but as well where this comes into the UX of actually making it a real thing that users can contend with and actually play with in real life. With that, I tried to find a clever way of fitting Privy into the story, and I didn't, so I'm just going to shill up front and then be done with it and get the good part. But basically, we are building simple APIs for people in Web3 to manage user data off-chain. What that means is we want you to build richer UX, which entails knowing more about your users than what is available on-chain. Your choices today are not very good when it comes to having that metadata. We want to help you secure that metadata whilst keeping your users in the loop. Privy, at a high level, operates locally in the client, so in your user's browser, in your user's mobile app, and we help you manage key management systems and encryption, permissions delegation, and storage, so you can take on user data safely, build richer experiences, but not have to touch all of the ick that is, real-world data that is not a core part of what you're building. So if you are building products that have to deal with user data that you don't want to be touching, please come talk to us. Today, Privy is really a SaaS tool. We're building for developers. We're helping developers leverage user data off-chain. But the point, obviously, is to then move into helping users control their data throughout the web, a mission that a lot of us here share. And so with that, I will jump into how we're thinking about this. So the first piece is sovereignty is not decentralization. If there's a main takeaway, I think, from the talk is I think decentralization is a necessary but not sufficient condition for data sovereignty in Web3. So I'll start off with basics. What is data sovereignty? I would define it as user control. Ultimately, decisions about data must be made by users themselves. Second, it means expressive revocable permissions. Me saying you have access to data is not enough. What data and what access? Is it that you can read it? Is it that you can write it? Is it that you can duplicate it and pass it on to another third party? And finally, the data needs to be portable. Google Takeout is not good enough. Me getting dumped a huge amount of JSON being like, here's your data, go forth. We need to have that data actually be interoperable across services that work off of our data backpacks. Why should we care? So I think first, and I'll spend a second talking about this one, it is the way to get mainstream Web3 right. If we don't do this well, Web3 will mostly be about financial flows, which would be sort of a sad, profitable but sad conclusion to this 10-year journey we've all been on. The second is that handling user data is a giant pain in the ass. As a developer, you want to touch it as little as possible. And so, can data sovereignty just help you focus on your core product so that you don't have to touch everything else? So I'll dig into the mainstream Web3 done right through data sovereignty piece. So yeah, without data sovereignty, I suspect Web3 is at best financial infra, or actually is best for financial infra. So, the thinking goes like this. As Web3 goes mainstream, it means more activity on the internet. Generally, Web3 itself will grow, but it also means more off-chain data, real-world data coming on-chain. Now, if that's the case, and we can't properly secure real-world data, we should stick to only on-chain sort of native Web3 data in our Web3 flows. We shouldn't introduce IRL data into the Web3 flows if we're either just going to dump it in a public state where it's accessible to everybody, or otherwise make it legible by all sorts of parties that you haven't given permissions to. So we need to get permissioning properly working in order to have sort of real-world data work in Web3. And so I will amend the early statement that I already amended sort of orally, but without it, Web3 is best for financial infra should actually read, without it, at best, Web3 is for financial infra. Because if we get data sovereignty wrong, at worst, Web3 is a tool for global surveillance. You get to see where I've been, who I've interacted with, who I've paid, how much, how I voted, I certainly don't want my governance records to be on chain. So that is my quick pitch for why we should care. And ultimately, I think data sovereignty will also be a path through which we get to build new user experiences as a whole, more delightful UX on the web where you don't have to sign up for things anymore. Wouldn't that be nice? And obviously, that's like the very obvious tip of the iceberg example. So with that, let me ask, how is sovereignty going? So for the user, we've kind of traded off so far in Web3 sovereignty for convenience. The UX of Web3 is too complex. We want good products. And so we've made a very rational decision, which is to use good products. Notifications are hard. I will use this tweet in every presentation I give until the end of time because it is so amazing. Maker is about to market dump $600 million worth of ETH unless someone can phone up this Seven Siblings guy and tell him to top up his vaults in the next 30 minutes. This is someone who's about to get liquidated in Maker, and no one can find who this person is, so they're turning to Twitter to try and identify the party. And so this leads to us putting email addresses in OpenSea and MailChimp getting hacked and our email addresses and wallet associations likewise becoming public. This I would call sort of the bad, and the ugly. The bad is me understanding what wallet I've connected to through my MetaMask. The bad is thinking, this is a Reddit post I saw earlier this week, somebody who thinks they've had who has had $88,000 worth of crypto stolen from their MetaMask, and who had a huge amount of theories about, their OPSEC and like somebody coming into their room stealing their keys. Obviously, they just entered a mnemonic in a website that wasn't MetaMask. So again, the UX is too hard for most users to actually grapple with. And then the ugly is me doxing myself every now and then and having to manage 12 wallets, including the ones I know I can't touch anymore because they're associated to other wallets that have my ENS name in it, so like I'm publicly known on there. So just a major pain in the ass. And so we turn to this. Gemini has built a very good NFT platform called Nifty Gateway, in which I can actually buy my NFTs with a card and Gemini will keep them for me. But are they really my NFTs in that case? I'm sure there are NFTs somewhere. They're just not really mine. For the developer, the situation isn't much better. Building a great product is hard enough. Having to reinvent the data stack is probably a step too far. And so we're stuck between Scylla and Charybdis. We have one monster, increasing regulation, pushing us to take less and less data. And on the other end, we have greater user demands. We need to build better UX to get adoption for our products. And so on the one hand, if we don't want to take this data on because we think the SEC is going to come and subpoena us, we can put the data on chain, not great for the user. And on the other hand, if we just want to build a product that works, we can just set up a Postgres and dump data in there. We know how that's been going for the last 30 years. So, to quote, I think, Spock in this cartoon, we have no choice. We must screw over our users to build good products. And so, yeah, I've gone through this. I'm going to skip to the sort of core thesis, which is in Web3, decentralization has become the closest proxy for sovereignty. It's hard enough to build sovereignty, so you ask yourself, can I just decentralize things instead? It's close enough. It's good enough. It is not good enough because decentralization obviously entails privacy harm. Unless you do it properly, putting user PII on chain or close to is a very dangerous thing. And I would argue it's just very lazy. If you tell a user, it's on chain, so you're good to go. If you don't like my product anymore, you can always get the data and fuck off. It's not true. Most users can't do that, and data formats means you lose context when you leave products. And so we need to move towards better tooling that marries on and off chain data properly in order to build good experiences in Web3. This is sort of the last piece. Sorry, I'm going to go slightly long, but you can cut me off. Okay. What do we do to build a self-sovereign future? So this is a quick recipe. It's obviously a very simple thing to do. The first thing is we need a self-sovereign backstop. So I'm not saying chains don't have a role to play here. In fact, I think chains are essential here. Ultimately, you need a layer of trustlessness in order to have sort of an arbiter of last resort. So I can always exit a system I've been a part of and get my data back. So the broke thinking is decentralized means self-sovereign. The woke thinking is decentralization is necessary but not sufficient. Now, I see the chain in the same way that I think about it in the case of rollups, which is the chain is sort of your lender of last resort. It is the place you go to when the DApp has exhausted all of your options with regards to your own sort of data ownership. It's transparent by default, and it's a guaranteed off-ramp. I tried to make this more technical. So I will give an idea for what an on-chain registry should look like, in my opinion, which is to say the chain, what the state that's put on chain in self-sovereign systems should be completely minimal. You should have a permissions sort of pointer. You point to who you are delegating permissions access to, and you should have a storage pointer. Where do you want this data to be? Now, the storage could be on-chain, off-chain. That depends on what you're trying to do with this. Is your threat model censorship resistance? Is it data leakage? The point is we need a very modular design, but with well-defined interfaces. And so the interfaces could be as simple as the permissioning system takes a user ID and a resource CID, a content address, and returns to you a bool. Yes, this person is allowed to access this content, and we will provide decryption keys on their behalf. And likewise, the storage, you pass in a resource CID, you don't get back a bool, that's a mistake. You get back ciphertext that you can then decrypt using the prior permission node that you were using. I have questions around how you actually build this, and in fact, we ask ourselves these questions very often at Privy. First, capabilities-based permissioning systems versus ACLs. I'm happy to talk about the UX trade-offs involved, which are nightmarish. Second, should the key management system and the permissions engine be commingled, or should they be separate? And I think that's a very deep question. And I'm not going to dive too much into these because I'm already late, sorry. And then should storage itself be permissioned, or is it okay to just put data, encrypted data, in public state? And I would argue that ciphers break over time, so you're taking some risk. If you say, we're good to go, it's encrypted. Lastly, or not lastly, sorry, I got 2 to go. The second piece is the tooling. We need strong standards so interoperable off-chain data becomes usable. You've heard of DIDs and VCs. We also, this is a shout out, please work on standards for authentication generally. How, as a developer, can I know who you are? Capabilities delegation. What is the standard language for me understanding what I can do for you? Global namespacing. You say address. Are you referring to your email address or to your home address? Is this the first line of your home address or the second? Are we talking about a zip code or a postal code? We need to agree on these things in order for data to be interoperable. And lastly, data formatting. This is the Google takeout issue. How can I actually move data around different dApps, different services, without losing the context that made it useful in the first place? This is random meandering, but the cool thing about blockchains, I would argue, is that they are sort of a self-enforced standard. Because the monetization is already a part of the standard, we basically can see which standards are most successful by just seeing the market cap of blockchains. It's a very questionable claim. But the issue with non-blockchain systems is that we have to have standards be enforced through sort of out-of-band coordination. We don't have the economic token to show us where we should be investing energy into making our systems interoperable. And so as protocol builders, as dApp builders, we should be, I think, more willing to adopt off-chain standards, try them. If they don't work for us, drop them and move on to the best ones. But yeah. Lastly, the sizzle. We need better UX. Data sovereignty means nothing if it doesn't exist up and down the stack. Being able to say, it's back to the sort of, in fact, I think I have this here, it's back to the same dereliction of duty. If you just say someone, you have data sovereignty, your systems are on chain, you're good to go, means nothing unless it's actually available to the average user who can do something with that data, take it with them. And so I think there's a lot to learn here from Web 2, actually. The permissioning system in iOS is pretty damn good. I think we can do a lot better, but it's probably the best thing I think we have right now in the world. And so the question then is, how do we build better sovereignty in Web3? And we have some companies that are already doing very good work, I think, around this. I think the session management work that Mira is doing is really good. I think Argent is doing really interesting work around wallet recovery and account recovery in a way that's both intuitive but also self-sovereign. And I think Disco is pushing how we interact with VCs in very meaningful ways. And so with that, in conclusion, oh no, this has happened before. Data sovereignty is more than just being on chain. We need to build user-centric systems on and off chain and across the stack in order to make sure Web3 is not just a financial tool set. Developer decisions are going to be made on spectrums. And so we need to be willing to try things, fail, try again, and generally walk different parts of the spectrum. If you talk and you say, well, the data needs to be put on decentralized storage, I argue you should have a really good reason for why that's the case, because it comes with trade-offs. And then finally, you should use Privy. Cool. Thank you.